What's up, guys? Welcome back to DC and welcome back to the Boys Takeover!
Yeah! Also, Mason, if you're in the mission trip that I just mentioned, half of the cost is due at by May 18th, and also the training I mentioned starts at 6:15.
Jackson,
Yeah.
did you know that including this Sunday, we only have a couple more Sundays left until summer DC?
Oh my goodness, man! You just broke my heart. But I'm very excited for the summer interns to get here. And also, if you are part of the Peru or Charlotte missions trip, the first training is this Wednesday.
Hey guys, breaking news. We are going to be announcing the camp themes the next 4 weeks, and the first one we're announcing this week is all 90s. Over these next few weeks, we just want to take some time and celebrate the Carmel students who've gone up on the last Wednesday night to share testimonies. So here they are.
Thought about tonight, it would be really cool to do a quick flyover over all of the series that we've done throughout the school year. And I thought, actually, what would be more fun than that is if we try to just rapid fire and touch on every single major theme and topic. And I thought, actually, it would be more fun than even that is if I had some help. And if Jaden Stevens came up and did it with me. Grab one of those mics right there. So let's talk about all that took place this year. And Jaden, you're pulling some double duty tonight. Back there, playing the drums, coming up here. So let's go back to the very beginning of the school year. How many of you were here for Soundtrack? Oh, yeah. All right. So tell us a little bit about what Soundtrack meant to you.
Yeah, Soundtrack was a really cool series because it's kind of set the tone for the rest of the year in many ways. It's even kind of funny. We got rickrolled at the end of the year.
Yeah, you did.
Yeah. Even further adding to the fact that subtle messages in our lives make up the soundtrack of our lives. So we looked at how our lives are meant to be a soundtrack of worship for the Lord. And we did that funny clip where we took the Star Wars clip and took the soundtrack out of it. And that Chewbacca scream is burned into my nightmares forever. It was horrifying. But that just goes to show that without our lives being aligned with God's soundtrack, they're always going to feel out of place.
Yeah, such a big deal. The soundtrack was something that we wanted you to think about all school year long. And then if you remember from there, we jumped into a brief series on forgiveness and what it means to be forgiven and forgive others. So what stood out to you from that series?
Yeah, totally. That was a really, really great series as well. I'm probably going to be saying that a lot because they all were. But we looked at how we can be forgiven through Jesus' sacrifice on the cross, but that how it doesn't stop there, but that moves in us so that we can forgive other people. And when I think about all the sins I've committed in my life, and I think that Jesus forgave me of all of those, I can forgive anyone of anything they do to me, even to the most extreme degree. And proof of that is actually Jesus, because during the Last Supper, he washed Judas's feet, who he knew would betray him. That kind of love can only come through abiding in him. But for many of us, it looked like receiving that forgiveness for ourselves and admitting that we are sinners and trusting Christ's sacrifice of forgiveness, that it was enough for us. And for many others of us, it looked like forgiving someone who had hurt us, looking to Jesus' example.
Yeah, so raise your hand if you remember taking a sticky note and putting it up in the shape of the cross up here. And you asked for forgiveness or you chose to forgive someone else. That's a big, big deal. And we need to continue to walk in that forgiveness all the days of our lives. Then we plowed forward, and Miss Sophia led us in a brief 2-week series all about redeeming the screen. So tell us a little bit about that one.
So that series was kind of unique in a couple different ways. Well, one, our screens, it's one of those topics that obviously isn't touched on a lot, and yet it's one of those topics that I feel like has a heavy, heavy weight, because we can either be owned by our screens or own them. We can use them as the great tools they can be for communication and relationship building, or they can become time-consuming idols in our lives. And it's only by daily renewal of our minds and fixing them on Christ that we can make sure that we are putting no one before him and that we are always using our screens and not letting them use us.
Yeah, and that's a big challenge for us, so it's something we've got to keep our minds on moving forward. Then we had a big question night. We had a couple of those this semester. So raise your hand if you had one of your questions answered either at any point in the school year. That's really cool. So we got plenty of others coming. And then we had a big night of worship here. If you remember, we're all gathered down here for Christmas night, focused on heaven came down. Really amazing night. And then we kicked off the new year with a one-off on being reset and how we start new rhythms and habits in our lives. And then we jumped into something that was super fun for all of us, Mixed Feelings Volume 2. So tell us a little bit about that one.
What I want to know is when we're getting the rerun of Volume 1 and possibly Volume 3.
Volume 3 could happen. I'm just saying.
Just looking forward to it. But we looked in that series about how to lead our emotions rather than let them lead us. And I believe we looked at, I'm always going to forget it. Yeah, it's joy, anger, loneliness, and love were the 4 emotions we looked at. And 2 of those, anger and loneliness, are more on the negative side, and 2, joy and love, are more on the positive. And I noticed something when I was just praying through this and thinking about it, that both of those things are gifts. As much as it may seem like loneliness or that emotion is not a gift, both of those help us better reflect Christ because we are made in his image, right? And Christ felt those emotions, but what's different between how I often act and how Christ acted is he keeps them in check, and he makes sure that he makes his good emotions not the goal of his life, and he understands that his bad emotions aren't wrong, but he keeps them in check. So it's only by, and I keep saying this tonight, seems to be a theme, that looking to his example, the only one who can fully do what we cannot do. That's the only way we can ever learn to control our emotions.
That's good. There's almost like there was a soundtrack going the whole year long that was teaching us that, right? And that's exactly what we wanted you all to think about, is that there's something about this truth of God's word that we dive into every week. And man, I just want to pause here and say, you all were phenomenal at just opening this book each week, diving into it, asking good questions, taking good notes, talking about in your small groups. It was an incredible blessing to see. And a lot of you learned how to lead your emotions well through this series, Mixed Feelings. And then came, dun, 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 the infamous, I wouldn't say dreaded. For some people, it's exciting, but for some people, they don't know how to handle this one. But when we talk all things love, dating, and marriage, me, we, and us, how many of you were here for that one? Okay. Very cool. So tell us a little bit about that.
That was easily my favorite series this week, and not for the reason you think. But don't get me wrong, all the others were incredible. But all throughout that series, we looked back at the theme that marriage refers to Christ in the church, right? And we looked at how to become the person we want someone else to marry one day. So we'll work on ourselves and not focus on finding the other person, trust God to bring them into our lives. But we also mainly focused on that the marriage is a picture of Christ in the church. I actually had a coworker who got married recently, which is super incredible. But she was telling us a story and was saying how she had her 5-year-old nephew walk down the aisle before her and yell, "The bride is coming, the bride is coming." It was all adorable. Everyone laughed. And I immediately got a picture of Christ in the church. Except there's a little subtle distinction here. We won't be going to Christ. He's going to come to us. And I think that's important because there's nothing we could ever do to get to him. It is only through his love and only through trusting in him that he comes and brings us to himself. But the fact that that's set in stone, and whether we take part in earthly marriage or not, that covenant marriage will always be set in stone.
Yeah. Such a big deal. God's design is so good for our relationships. So we've got to keep moving forward in that, keep growing in that. Let's keep growing in that. What Ephesians 5 is exactly what I was quoting, that this is a mystery that's been revealed, Christ in the church. And then we wrapped up just these last few weeks with a study on eternity. So give us a snapshot of that.
Yeah, so during this study, we got a chance to look at the eternal God and how our lives align with him, both in the future, yes, but also in the today. And we all have a desire for eternity graven in our hearts. That's why nights like this, where it's the last midweek before the summer, are very bittersweet, because we know that, well, we have the hope that it will come again, but at the same time, it's ending, and we don't like things to end. Eternity is engraved in our hearts, and we long for God's presence, to be in his presence for all eternity. But the really cool thing about that is eternity starts now. His presence is in us now. So because of that, we know that we are able to live chain-free for him. So when I was thinking through this, I was wondering, I had always heard that expression, like, live free for Christ, all this. And then I realized that eternity is why we can do that. Because of eternity, there's nothing this world could throw at us that would ever harm us, even remotely. Even the worst imaginable thing would only send us to eternity with God. There is no defeat for the believer. And because of this, we're able to go shamelessly and powerfully into the world and proclaim his name in truth and love.
Can you give Jaden a hand for walking through all those? That was incredible. Man,